Let's go ahead and rewind the clock back to October of 1995, and let's take a look at a cult classic that is turning 30 this month. You named it. It's Mallrats.
Starting transmission.
All right, kind of give you a brief summary. This is actually Kevin Smith's second film, and also the second film in his View Askew universe. Yes, before Marvel had the MCU, before DC had their DCEU, DCU, and all that stuff, Kevin Smith had an actual universe that was all interconnected, and that's the View Askew universe. And this is actually his second film that came right out after his massive hit with Clerks in 1994. Today we're going to be talking about Mallrats, and this is probably one of my favorite Kevin Smith movies. Not my top favorite, Dogma has that spot, and then Clerks. But you know what? Mallrats has a lot going for it. Yeah, when this movie was released in theaters, it barely touched the 2 million mark. That's not that great, especially for your second film. And after your first film was like a hit, critics hated this movie. It was just like this could have been very much the end of Ken Smith's career. And he talks about in his books that he thought it was all over after Mallrats. Luckily, he came back with Chasing Amy, and his career, it has been going strong for almost 30 some years now. So, which is just crazy to think about. So, what is Mallrats? So, the movie follows Brody and TS. These are two kids that are, trying to figure out what they're going to do with their lives, where they're going to go next. They're having trouble with their girlfriends. They're having trouble just trying to find out where they belong and where they belong in the universe. And this whole movie just takes place in one day. And this is like the zany, crazy adventures. It's probably the one of the most, like, crazy, like, most active malls I've ever seen. I grew up when the malls were still very popular. They were kind of dying out in the 90s. But, people knew who Mallrats were. They knew what that term meant. So I wasn't necessarily a mall rat. It wasn't my vibe, my cup of tea. But for my wife, she was a mall rat. And she would always love to hang out at the mall and tell all these crazy stories about the stuff that happened at the malls when she was there, when she was younger. For me, that was never my cup of tea. And so I kind of lived vicariously through this movie on what life in the mall would be like. But like I said, this mall had a lot of crazy things going on. It was taking place during Easter, so you had the Easter Bunny there. You had a live taping of a game show called Truth or Date going on in there. And then you just had also like a giant comic book signing with the legend, the man himself, Stan Lee, all going on at the same time at this mall. So just crazy to think about like all the adventures these two had just in one day at the mall. So let's kind of go into some behind the scenes of this movie and kind of talk about some of the stuff that has happening while they were filming this movie. So our two main characters were T.S. and Brody. T.S. is played by Jeremy London, and of course Brody is played by the now very famous Jason Lee, who in his very first movie debut, because right before this he was actually a very famous skateboarder. So check that out. I mean, if you go look at some of the documentaries he made back in the day, it's just crazy. He went from skateboarding, being like a professional skateboarder, to now a professional actor. And and the two female leads in this movie, we have Shannon Doherty playing Renee, who is Brody's ex-girlfriend, and then we have Claire Fellaini, I probably butchered that like crazy. I'm sorry about that. Who is playing Brandy, and that's T.S. ex-girlfriend too. We have your usual. We have Silent Bob, played by Kevin Smith. And then we had Jason Mewes, who is playing Jay. And the crazy thing about this is when this movie is being made, they did not want Jason Mewes to play Jay. The studio was like, we don't know who he is, Kevin. You can't be hiring your friends. And they actually had auditioned Seth Green and Breckin Meyer. Those two actors, they are very popular with the Robot Chicken Show. They were hired to play the character of Jay, and I can't believe how different this franchise would have been if they would have recast Jay from the Jay and Silent Bob duo. You know, and it would have been a completely different movie, I think. But yeah, it's just crazy to think about that we almost lost that. But Kevin Smith has always said that Jay was like the heart of this duo, and he told Jay like, "Hey, you got to go in there. You got to prove up to them that you're worthy of being in this movie." In my opinion, I think Jason Mewes did. So here we go. We have Jason Mewes now playing Jay, and Kevin Smith playing Silent Bob. And then you got to round out the rest of the cast. Some of the other characters that you wouldn't see in future Kevin Smith projects, like Joey Adams playing one of the best friends of Renee. You have cameos from Kevin Smith's two of Kevin Smith's best friends, Walt Flanagan and Brian Johnson. You have Scott Mosier having a little brief cameo. You have Ethan Suplee, who's playing another character in this movie, playing a character in the movie who's actually like obsessed with his 3D artwork of a sailboat, which, if you don't know, it's not really a sailboat. Yeah, if you pause the movie, you'll realize what the real image is in those 3D arts. Anyways, you had like Michael Rooker, who's playing Brandy's dad, and he's like the producer of the dating show Truth or Date. So, and then you have a cameo from the man himself, Stan Lee, in this movie. And you know what? His speech at the end of the movie to Brody it's such a wonderful speech, and it's like one of the most powerful speeches I think Stan Lee's ever given in a film, and it's such a great speech. I mean, if I can, I'll put the clip here of that speech. If I can't put the clip in this video, I'll put a link to that clip down below.
Hey, Stan. Yeah. She really meant that much to you?
Brody, I'd give it all up. All of it. For just one more day with her. Take care.
And also in this movie is a brief cameo from Ben Affleck, who would end up going on to be one of Kevin Smith's best friends. You know, he has a small role in this movie where he's playing kind of a douchey sales guy. But yeah. And at the heart of this movie, you have T.S., who was in love with Brandy and doesn't want to let her go. And it was actually was planning on proposing to her, but that all went haywire. And he's ready to make the next move, and he's ready to grow up and be an adult. Where you have Brody, who's on the opposite side, whose girlfriend is actually wanting him to become more of an adult and more responsible, and he's like, "No, I want to go hang out with my friends and keep doing what I'm doing." So yeah, these two characters who are basically trying to achieve opposite things, and how these two characters basically bring the best out of each other. So you have Brody here, who is forcing TS to get out of his comfort zone and actually make the big move to tell his girlfriend he loves her and wants to marry her. And then you have TS, who is basically in a way helping Brody realize it's time to grow up and put like all these childish things away. So, so that is an overall like message of this movie. So the movie gets made, it everything's going to be in the next Dazed and Confused, the next Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and unfortunately, it doesn't. It barely makes $2 million in theater. Like I said, it becomes a total failure in the box office. Critics hated this movie. Fans didn't really go see it either. They didn't see why to go see this movie. And it wasn't until the film was released on VHS. Yep, VHS. So they did this little thing right here that my Sam Bob has. It actually found a cult audience on VHS, and this movie has become one of the most popular movies of Ken Smith's career. It just took a little while. It took about 5 or 10 years before it became the hit that it is now. And I bet you I could say that maybe a lot of people actually found Kevin Smith via Mallrats than they did on Clerks. So it's such a legacy this movie has had, and I'm so happy to know that it's the 30th anniversary, and we're probably going to get some really cool things this year. They haven't really announced much. Kevin Smith just barely got the rights back for the most part, but yeah. So who knows what's going to happen with the movie? There has been talks about having a Mallrats too, but all the way back in 2015, Kevin talked about having a brand new Mallrats movie. He talked about changing it to a TV show. The most recent one was that it was going to be called Twilight of the Mallrats. But it's kind of like died down now. With the passing of Shannon Doherty in 2024, the talks of being a sequel has pretty much died out. I don't know if we'll ever see a sequel. I know if you are interested in seeing more of the stories of TS and Brody, you can more than welcome to go check out the comic book series, because a lot of the View Askew comics do kind of go into more of their stories. And if you watch other Kevin Smith movies, you do see what happens to a lot of the characters. Like, for example, Brody. We find out that Brody ends up owning his own comic book store called Brody's Secret Stash, named obviously after Jay and Silent Bob's Secret Stash comic in Jersey. Who knows what the future holds for Mallrats? Maybe it will be a sequel. Maybe it'll be a TV show. Maybe we'll never see anything. But at least we'll always have the movie series to watch. So with that being said, there is some collectibles out there you can get from Mallrats. If you go to the Smart Castle Cinemas website, you can buy some signed posters from Kevin Smith for Mallrats. You can get some action figures and collectibles from Mallrats too that were from Diamond Select Toys. There are some other action figures are out there too from different companies. These here figures, these Mallrat figures here of Jay and Silent Bob, are actually from Chogrin and UVD Toys. So I'll show you guys here on the bottom of this box. And I have two different versions of them. I have the black and white version I have here, and I have a blue version that was a special, that was an exclusive to New York Comic Con 2022. And I believe Tenacious Toys was the one that released these. I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong on there. But yeah, these are really cool looking exclusives. And they're super detailed. They're little fun little figures. So you guys get a little closer look at Jay and Silent Bob. Yeah, so yeah, there you go. Yeah, and these are really cool figures to have, and I actually like having these part of my collection. So without further ado, guys, let me know in the comment section down below. Have you ever seen Mallrats? Is it one of your favorite movies? Is it a classic in your household? Have you never seen Mallrats? You know what? This movie is a staple of the 90s. It actually shows 90s culture great. You know, the mall era is dead. Kids these days probably don't even know what a Mallrat is or know what that culture is because it's been gone for so long. But if you want to take a look at what 90s were like at the malls, I recommend you check out Mallrats. And then to wrap it all up, guys, make sure you're hitting the like, the subscribe, and the notification bell. That way you're notified every time a new video is posted. Until next time, guys, this is JD with the Figgy Pop Collector Channel.
That concludes a Figgy Pop transmission.
So we're going to take a look at the cult classic, no, damn it, Mallrats.